So, welcome to the Three Principles Global Community webinar. The Three Principles Global Community, or 3PGC, is a nonprofit organization that is committed to bringing an understanding of the three principles as introduced by Sydney Banks to people throughout the world. My name is Stephanie, and I'm here to guide us through the experience today and introduce our very special speaker, Ms. Judith Sedgeman. And Judith is going to talk today about imagination, our infinite capacity to change. And just a little bit about Judy. She is a respected mentor, presenter, and lifelong learner of the principles of mind, consciousness, and thought as discovered by Sydney Banks. She was one of the early students of Sydney Banks. What she saw inspired her to change her entire approach to managing her business, parenting a teenager, and defining what is important. She's worked with individuals, organizations, and institutions globally for more than 40 years. So without further ado, Judy, take it away.
Okie doke. Well, hi, everybody. Hi to the people that I don't know, and hi to the many people that I do know and haven't seen for a while. And by the end of this, hopefully you'll feel like we all know each other. Um, see, this meeting is being transcribed. I got to click OK. Okay. I'm trying to get used to doing everything I do on a laptop now because I've moved into a much smaller space. And my beloved old desktop died, and so now you're all kind of tiny. So forgive me if I squint. Anyway, it's really such a pleasure to talk to people. I love doing these things with 3PGC. Well, actually with anyone, but especially with 3PGC because I was kind of around when it all got started, and so the organization has really turned into it has now become a global community. When it started, the word global was aspirational, because most of us were in the United States and Canada. And now it's truly a global community, and it's kind of like we lived up to our aspiration. So it's kind of thrilling. I want to encourage you to ask questions. Feel free to interrupt me if you want to interrupt me. I'm not that much in love with things I have to say. I want to make sure that I answer questions if they occur to you. And if you do put questions in the chat, Stephanie's going to help me. We're going to look occasionally, but if you have an urgent question, just raise your hand. If it's relevant, like I'm saying something and it didn't make sense to you right then and there, just go ahead and raise your hand and we'll see it. So, and I'm going to talk about imagination because I think it's got a bad rap in the world. Like your imaginary friends when you're little, your mother thinks it's cute that you have imaginary friends. And I used to have imaginary pets when I was little because we lived in an apartment in the city when I was in my childhood, and we couldn't have pets. And so I had various imaginary pets. I switched them out from time to time since they weren't real. I didn't have to kill anything off. And and we talk about the imagination as if it's kind of silly or not serious or something just for literature and poetry. But that is the greatest power that we have as human beings, is to imagine something we've never seen before and then make it true. Um, and I really feel as though that's the gift that the principles offer people. For years, we used to call it original thought, and sometimes we use the word wisdom and kind of give it a blanket meaning, which includes, just imagining things. But, when you are thinking about what you already know, you're really in your intellect going over stuff that you already know. That is the intellect. The definition of intellectual effort is searching around in your known stuff to see if you can rearrange it or find something new there, or um, find the answer to a problem that you forgot you knew. And when you just quiet down and you leave your thinking alone, that's when imagination comes to life and you start to imagine things that never occurred to you before. And that's when you have original ideas, and that's when you find answers when you've been struggling with a problem and you haven't found the answer in what you already know. And when I first learned the principles, I was running a business and I was it was complicated. I was doing medical practice management and we were doing all the business of medical practices and groups. So that the doctors, I thought, would be a wonderful thing because they would have all this time now to devote to their patients and they wouldn't be worried about paperwork and insurance and money. But I found out very quickly that if people are want to worry, they'll find something to worry about. The habitual worriers are not dissuaded from worry by the fact that there's nothing much to worry about. They find it. So um, I was very shocked to discover that we really weren't making their lives uh, we just sort of widened the prospect of things that now they could worry about. They could worry about whether we were doing our jobs and how we were doing and whether they had picked the right service or whatever. So that's how I met Bill Pettit, though, and that's how I got involved in the principles because he was my client and he was the only client at that time. I had 67 groups or individual practices that our company managed. And he he was, and I would say remained. I can't really think of anybody else that arrived in a similar state who was seriously in need of practice management and was willing to accept that fact and wasn't concerned at all. He just didn't have, he was like a happy guy. And he loved practicing medicine, and he had heard that we did good work, so he just assumed that we did good work and turned it over. It's like your ideal client if you're in the consulting business, is they say, "Oh, I know you know what you're doing. You just take care of it, and let me know what you need from me or my staff." Instead of what we normally encountered, which was people would try to look over our shoulders, and the very reason they hired us is because they didn't really know how to do what we did, but they thought they did. So, so it was a very different experience, and I became very curious, especially since he was a psychiatrist who's, let's say, as a practice, uh, one might expect psychiatrists to be gloomy and worried, just from the reputation of the practice of psychiatry. And if there are any psychiatrists on the call, forgive me, but that is kind of like what people would expect. And yet he was not like that. And so I asked him, like, why don't you ask questions? Why aren't you concerned that we're not doing our job? He said, well, people seem to think you're really good at what you do and you're very honest and you have a great reputation and you're fun to work with and my staff likes you. And so I'm not worried about it. And he said, what have I got to worry about? I'm not worried about my patients and they could be out there doing terrible things to themselves and others. So why would I worry about somebody who seems to be doing okay? And he just kind of made light of it. And for me, people making light of something serious was unique. It was kind of unique in the business world. It may not be unique worldwide, but in my business world, it was unique. And I thought, but yeah, it's really a great way to be, though, because if you don't feel insulted every time somebody asks you a question, you don't feel like you're being judged all the time, and you're not worried about whether you know something or not, and you're not afraid to say, I don't know. God, what freedom that would be. You could just, wow. And the first thing that occurred to me as I started I got interested in the principles and I started sitting in on groups that he did, and Sid had just written Second Chance, and that was the only book at that time. So I read that, and then I met Sid, and who came to visit Bill. But during the course of that first several months that I got involved in this, the first thing that I realized is that I really didn't have any fun with my clients. I was very serious about my business. We did a good job, and we met with them and we revealed our numbers and everything and gave them as much information as they wanted to back it up or turned it over to their accountants if they wanted somebody to review it. And it's not like we weren't doing well, but it just wasn't fun. So, and I don't know how I got interested in fun all of a sudden, but I did. And so and I thought to myself, you know what? I really am always dealing in the here and now with my clients. We go to a meeting and we talk about what happened last month, bring them up to date, talk about what they can expect or trends in their practice or things that they need to change or somebody they wanted to hire or switch off or property they wanted to look at for something and that was it. And I thought, I have no idea what they would like to do if they could do anything. I really had no idea what I might like to do, actually, so at that time. And so I remember at 1 month I had my staff together and I said, you know what, in the next month's staff meetings with the clients, monthly meetings, which we used to call practice meetings. And I remember Bill asked me the rude question, like, how many times do we have to practice before we get it right? It was short for medical practice meetings, but he found something funny in everything. And and so I said, we're going to just have a conversation about imagining their practice if they could do anything. Forget about looking at the details. Do we have the money? Can we borrow them? All of that. Let's just talk about if you could build something new or create something new in your practice or do something different, what would it be? And so we had the meeting, we presented our short report. I shortened our reports tremendously and basically just did a summary report. And we had the big stack of all the backup information. If they wanted it, they could take it away. And and then I said, well, I want to do something a little different. I think it would be fun if we just talked about, like what's your dream? Like for practice, like some of them were people, young guys who had just joined a practice that was run by people who were getting ready to retire. And, I just didn't know what they had in mind, what they were dreaming about. So some of them were people who've been practiced for a long time, been friends for a long time. Some of them were very recent and they were still getting to know each other. So I just asked that question, like if taking off the table the details, let's assume that we can deal with the details. What would be your dream? What would you like to do? Well, the floodgates of imagination opened up. And these very serious people who normally were looking at their watch and just flipping through the pages of the reports that we presented and, coming and going very seriously, all of a sudden, they got kind of quiet. And then, they started talking about, well, we'd love to build, like one group was a cardiology group, and they wanted to recruit people that had learned, the very advanced things in cardiology and then persuade the hospitals to upgrade their cardiology units. We were in kind of a smallish town and where they could really, bring the very best of cardiology practice to our community because they felt like it would be wonderful. And they had one new member of the practice who had joined in the previous year, and he had obviously the most recent training, and he was always talking about that and got them all worked up and excited about it. So, I looked at it and I said, why don't we go talk to the hospital administrators? Because it would be in the hospital's best interest if you had the capacity to do these things. Um, it would be in the hospital's best interest to be able to help you support gathering the machinery, the support staff and so on that you need. And in their best interest to have an advanced cardiology unit because we're in Florida. A lot of people retire in Florida. Cardiology is a big deal. And so that was my contribution, my original thought. And I imagined having a big, kind of uh, like a big sort of weekend retreat with some of the leading people in the hospitals, the people in administration in the hospitals. There were two in our town, and really presenting a dream. And they got behind it. Well, it all worked out. It happened. And I just did what needed to be done to make sure that we found the right piece of property and, got the best deal we could on all the stuff we bought. The hospitals really helped a lot with buying the equipment. And and it was just so exciting. Well, it's like practice after practice as I would start to go to the imagination and out of the let's go over the past and make sure we're on track here as the only subject. They got more. And one of the doctors said to me about 6 months later, he said, I have never been more excited about the practice of medicine because I never had the time or the space or the inclination before to even imagine. I was too busy to think about what I might like to do next with this work. And well, we could all say that, all of us who spend a lot of time going over and over what's going on now in the intellect, we don't use our imaginations that much. We don't ask ourselves, well, what if? And I remember having a conversation, I think it was with the group that was in Tampa, which was, well, Elsie Spittle, whom some of you probably have listened to speak or spoken with or read her books, and Chip and Jan Chipman. So, and I remember saying, where do you think, what do you think we should be doing? I went up to Tampa to visit with them and talk to them. And I said, what do you think we should be doing to, Sid really wants to see this get out in the world and he works so hard, travels around, talks to people, shows up wherever we ask him to. And, and right then, if we had a conference and 60 people came, we'd be thrilled. There were so few people in the world that had ever heard of this when I first got involved, like 60 people would be a giant crowd. And that may seem hard to believe now, but it was true. And so they started, I remember I had lunch with Elsie and Elsie said, I don't, I mean, she said, it's limitless what we could do. She said, as soon as I kind of dropped my concern about the limits we face, I realized there are no limits. And the only limits we have are the things that we think we can't do. That's it. Anything we think we can do and we imagine and look at and attempt, either it works out or we see that we didn't want to do it after all, or we wanted to do it differently or something else. But we can do anything. We can try anything. And a lot of times people don't realize that imagination is a power, not just a playground, it's a power. And imagination is just new thought. Imagination is kind of what you get when your mind quiets down and you're just allow it to be. That's why so many people say, it's funny how I get my best ideas when I'm on vacation. I'm not even trying to think about work. That's the point. You know, you're not, thinking about what you already know about work. You're on vacation and your mind is free and clear, and you just suddenly ideas pop into your head. So it is kind of like the unsung hero to me of the power of thought is the fact that the mind at rest, at peace, will bring to light something that you hadn't thought of before because it imagines something that just could come into being. And I'm going to stop for a second and say, does anyone have an example to share from your own experience of times when looking back now, you say, yeah, that's happened to me. I've thought about something or tried to kind of come to grips with problems or things and that. And then all of a sudden, I went away for the weekend or I was out canoeing and whatever it might be. And suddenly I saw what I needed to see, what I wanted to see. Is there anybody that could share something like that? Can you relate to it? I can't tell. There's a lot of screens. Well, let me ask this, let me re-ask the question, just can you relate to it? Maybe you could just nod if you think you can, this makes sense to you. It looks like something. Now, the second question I have, does it sound good or does it frighten you? How many people would say it sounds good? I see heads nodding. And the only reason it would frighten us is because we're afraid of the unknown. And that's something that, the unknown is just what you don't know yet. I mean, it's not, there's nothing really frightening about the unknown. There's somebody knows something that you don't know, and so on and so forth. And then there's all the things that we just haven't discovered yet in life. But the imagination looks to the unknown to find new things. That's what our imagining, what imagination is. It's the ability to use our thought creatively to bring things to life that will help us. But since we don't know them, we can't imagine them until they come to mind for us. Like they come from something deeper than our intellect. And we talk all the time, and Chris and I have talked about this a lot because it comes up on our podcast a lot. We're not trying to suggest that there's anything negative about the intellect. The intellect is valuable. It's your memory. It's everything you know. It's everything you've learned. It's everything you've studied. And it's, the more you have stored away there, the more interesting things you can bring to mind. But the intellect is unaware of anything you haven't already thought. So if you've already thought it and you try to remember it, usually maybe you can't remember it in the first 5 minutes, but usually in the shower or the next day or something, oh yeah, it comes back to you because it's there. But the intellect is like your library. It's like your personal library. The imagination is the universal unknown. It's like the potential. It's the universal potential. It's the space from which, some forms take shape that have not been seen. And it is the only source of change, really. If you already know something, you can rearrange it and you can think it over and mix it up with other stuff and you can play with it, but it's always going to be something familiar, maybe in a new form. It's like a recipe, like I've done all of these things with pasta. Maybe I'll put some different stuff in there, but it's all stuff you're familiar with. But the imagination is like it's like a surprise gift. Somebody comes to your door and says, "Here, open this." And it is the source of change. And so many people that I've talked to in the three principles, when they first get involved, and you'll say, "Well, what brought you to?" I always ask people, "Why did you want to talk to me?" Or "What are you hoping for from our encounter?" Or what drew you to the understanding? Almost always they say, "Well, I'd like to change. I'm tired of being depressed, or I'm tired of, whatever's going on in my thinking that I keep thinking about, or I'm tired of nightmares. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of that, or I want to get along better with this person." No one that I'm aware of has ever, that I can remember, come and said, "I would love to be able to imagine something I I don't even know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a new ideas, new answers, new thoughts." So, but that is really what we are looking for. That's what change is. Change is like, I'm not going to do what I've been doing, or things are going to be different, and different is going to contain something new. So I see Sarah Edwards with a hand up. Would you like to ask a question or comment, Sarah?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I've had an experience in the last week.
Great.
My husband and I have separated, and he wants to sell the house. He hasn't said anything about divorce, but he just, I believe, because of money.
Mhm.
And I was adamant. I was like, no, I'm not selling the house. I'm not moving. I'm not doing it. But I got really quiet.
Mhm.
And then I seen a house that I like. And I thought, well, how am I going to go forward with this? And I just sat very quietly with it. And it's all started to just unfold. So I've had people contact me about how to get a mortgage, because I've never done it before, because it's always been me and my husband, and I was so like frightened about it, but it just seemed to just flow now. So like I'm getting lots of advice, and I've got people in to value our house, and it just seems to just come naturally. Where when I got quiet before, it was like, no, I'm just sticking my heels in, and I don't want this to happen, and it's not going to happen. And then it feels really good,
Yeah.
and it just feels simple. It does, like it just feels effortless and peaceful. Like I don't have any noise in my head. Oh, you shouldn't be doing this. You're stupid. You can't do it.
Yeah.
Because I used to have those thoughts, and I don't have those anymore. And it's just a nice feeling that I, it's a big decision, and
Yeah.
just see where it unfolds. Really,
Yeah, it's kind of opening your imagination to a whole fresh start. Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
That's a great story. And that is how it feels. It's like you feel stuck and you're trying to make it work and listen to people, and then all of a sudden, you clear your mind and it starts getting very clear, and then people start showing up that you need.
yeah.
It's really
And
interesting how that happens. Yeah.
it's amazing to watch, because it's like I've got 3 people in to view the house, and then somebody contacted me about the mortgage, and then somebody said, would you like to view the house? and
Yeah.
and it's just see where it goes, really.
Well, I wish you the best, and that's a great story. Thank you for sharing it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Tom Maddox.
Oh, hey Judy.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How you doing?
Good.
I love this topic.
Hmm.
I absolutely love this topic. Um, I had an insight like about a year ago or something that I noticed that was turned out to be very profound. I noticed that I would imagine something that I might like in my life,
Hmm.
and then within like 1 second, some kind of negative or limiting thought would swoop in.
Right.
And in the past, I didn't notice that they were two different things. I
Mhm.
just oh, well, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But once I saw that, I realized I could just go back to the nice feeling of imagining something, like even for 2 seconds.
Hmm.
And I realized that, you know, one of the things about imagine, we can just enjoy what we imagine.
Hmm.
Whether we do it or it happens or not, we can just sit in the enjoyment
Yeah.
of inspiration that our divine mind has given us to enjoy. And I have to tell you, some really big things happen without me even doing anything different than I usually do.
Me
So
too.
that's kind of like a bonus in a
Hmm.
way. Maybe it's all one thing, but the idea that I don't have to follow those negative limiting thoughts. I can just like dwell for a few seconds in
Hmm.
the kind of a wouldn't it be nice feeling. Like,
Hmm.
why not?
Yeah. That's beautiful. I love that. And I love the what you pointed out, that you can go back to it. That it's easy to slip right back as soon as you experience true quiet inside your mind, and you see the difference between thinking in a good mood and just leaving your mind alone. It's amazing. It's an
Yeah,
amazing experience.
yeah,
It's the next level.
100%.
Yep.
Great.
So Anna Ferrari, you have your hand up.
Hi, Judy. It's good to
Hi.
see you. Good to see everybody. Same. I second what Tom say. I'm really, really grateful for this topic because, you're highlighting that thought is a creative power and
Mhm.
imagination is, I want to say our birthright, but I
It is.
didn't know.
Mhm.
I didn't know that it could be um, that productive or create such an impact in the world, because we can imagine a world full of love and understanding,
We can.
and and I that fills me up with something, and sometimes it's a little bit too much. So I have to settle down, and but it's very interesting how even wisdom, I had that thing about love and understanding come to me a few years ago. And only a few months ago, I really saw that there is something to it, that I can go and talk to people, especially teenagers, about love and understanding, and high schools, and if we can bring, awareness to that aspect of who we are. And I'm finding that whoever I share it with, there is a good reception to it. So the thing that Tom was saying about the thought saying, is either the but or the how. I think it's just not really up to us to entertain the buts or to figure out the hows.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way to
So
put it. Yeah.
yeah, so I'm really, really happy that you brought this to me, because now I was like, I'm gonna put my imagination at work,
Yeah.
at service. So, and the other thing is, to what you were saying before, we started recording, is I just spent 3 days with Jack Bransky, and we did a deep listening.
Oh, yeah. I saw his Facebook post about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and after that, wherever I go, people want to talk to me. So I go to the beach and I get talking with a lady, and then I go to the supermarket and I get talking with another lady, and I just, I always feel like I want to find how to seek space without feeling like I'm pushing people away, because my time with myself and is very important. It's the foundation of everything. So I don't know if I'm making much sense about that particular thing, but if something comes to you about, balancing your personal life with your sort of service persona or role or
Yeah.
aspect, yeah, that would be my question. If you can find a question in that.
Yeah. Well, the question in that is, they often ask question, how do you do it? Yeah. And the thing is, you'll know how to do it when you get quiet enough that it's the direction that you're going, and probably I would say for me, like I would say things like, oh, I just can't imagine how I would find time in my day. Notice the word language there. I would,
Right.
I'm so busy and I've got so many obligations with this just before I learned the principles. My doctor told me I was stressed and he wanted to put me on Valium and I refused. And he said, well, you're going to have to figure something out. And interestingly enough, when he said that, I quieted down and I thought, well, what now? What if you don't take medication? What do you do? And I didn't know, but all of a sudden, then like 3 weeks later, I met Bill Pettit. Just sort of signed on as a new client, and I went and I happened to be in the neighborhood, so I called on him. I normally might have sent one of my staff, and it was really a funny thing because that was the beginning of my seeing how to change my life. So I think trusting that out of the quiet, out of the universal depth of quiet, in a still mind, you'll see what you need. That's step 2 is, about everything, not just not just the answer to the math problem that you're working on or something, but just about life. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I am going to mispronounce your name. The person whose hand is up. Is it, how do you say it? Ufe? No, I can't.
Yes.
Hmm?
Yes, hello.
Hi.
My name is Uffe.
I was close. That's great. Nice to
Yeah,
meet you.
you were close. Yeah. So my name is Uffe Hvidkjær. I'm from Denmark.
Nice to see you.
And I just wanted to share 2 things. what you said about, maybe having a good idea when you actually were having holiday. I have often realized that, for example, if I have some difficult thoughts, I go and exercise. I go for a walk, I go for a run, I go for a bike ride. And during this exercise, the thoughts are getting more positive. In a way, quite simple, to use the nature to get out, to get some exercise, and then you get some better answers. And then another thing is now we are in the global community. I started working with the 3P last summer. And my idea is just to be in there and then, to be in a meeting like this, and then I trust that I get some good answers. Just 14 days ago, I hosted my first 3P meeting. And we were 12 people in my very small apartment here. And it was so nice because I was really able to listen to everyone and just enjoy to being a host. And I call my process 3P and global dialogue because I'm working also in a global project about Denmark's role in the world, because Denmark is EU president this year, and they are now also part of UN Security Council.
Yes.
So my idea, and I have talked to Natasha, the 3P GC new president, about this. She's from Denmark also, and
yes,
she said it was a good idea to try to research, if all the global difficult solutions, for example, in UN Security Council, what if they did that on 3 principles? I think it has a lot of potential, but of course, I know there's also a lot of dilemmas, and not easy just to say that now UN Security Council are using 3Ps, but I just try to, say the question, and then I get some answers, and I just do it now again, and just to see what do you think when I say something like this. Thank you so much. It's nice to be here.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing that. And I'm sure you'll get a great idea because you're right. Denmark is rising to a position of leadership where your ideas will have a platform. So that's very, very excellent. That's wonderful. It's funny, years ago, I'm not a big proponent of war, and I never was, So when I was young, I was a person who was among those who protested the Vietnam War. And of course, it didn't make any difference, but I have always thought war is the best answer that really insecure people can come up with to be safe. I just think that fighting is what people do when they're insecure and they're just trying to make sure that they can be strong enough to be safe. And I always thought that people would never go to war if they were at peace inside themselves. You couldn't possibly want to kill somebody for any particular reason at all, never mind just kill hordes of people, if you were just at peace within yourself, satisfied and at ease and confident that the humanity is connected. And I've thought many, many times that if I had known this, nobody knew it. It was before Sid even had seen had his experience when that war was going on. But if the world had known this at a time when there were so many people who were desperate for peace but didn't know how to get it. But I saw that happen. It was interesting to me that, we all started when we were really young as like the flower children. We were handing flowers to policemen and, peacefully going off to jail if they had us singing while we were, being led off. And it was all just, we were trying to practice the piece that we wanted to see. And we were young and dumb, so we tried it, we did it. And then we got kind of depressed and cynical because we didn't know any better. We didn't know how to really bring that enthusiasm and caring and love and understanding to light. And so we ended up, trying to end war by declaring war essentially on the streets, and that didn't work out. And it was an interesting thing to me when I think back on it. I think that was like a potential turning point in history. And so it looks to me like we might be heading for a similarly interesting turning point now, but there's more depth of understanding in the world today. So it'd be interesting. I wish you the very best in everything you do, but don't stop doing it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I don't see any other hands right now, so I will just go on. And one more point that I really wanted to make has to do with seeing that you don't ever want to be afraid of your own thoughts. That's the other thing. A lot of people, when you think about children, I always think that George Pransky made the remark one time when I first met him. He said, children are humanity's starter kit. And when you look at little children, you kind of see everything that's available to us. They get upset, they get over it. But they can imagine anything, and they're not afraid to imagine scary monsters, and they're not afraid, they don't like them when they come to them in their dreams, but they're not afraid to make them up. And they're not, if you ask a little child, can you dance? They get up and dance. If you ask a 16-year-old, can you dance? They're like, oh, not really. I'm not very good at it. I can't really do it, But if you ask a 3-year-old, can you dance? They just get up and sure, turn the music on, So children are kind of like the uninhibited. They haven't got a lot of scary thoughts about being afraid to look silly or, embarrass themselves in public or say the wrong word or anything. They just kind of do their life. And it's very interesting to watch thoughts. I started doing that. I started doing that, when my grandchild was born, is to watch how as time went by, the thinking got more dense and complicated, and the spontaneity kind of drifted out of his life. It's kind of like you had to remind, as kids get older, you have to remind them it's okay to be spontaneous, giggle away, So yeah, tell me a funny, stupid joke. It's okay. But I think that's something that we discover naturally in ourselves in our uninhibited moments, which is why people like to, take walks in the woods and go off and sit by a stream and fish and, go out by themselves in a little boat and row around. And there's those moments when you are really free to be and entertain whatever thoughts you want. And if you feel like singing, you can sing. And that's unleashing your imagination. And what I see in a lot of people I work with now is they'll say, well, I'm quiet a lot. But they're not talking, but that's not quiet. Just because you're not talking doesn't mean your mind is quiet. And I think we've lost something that I think Sid used to talk about always, and which was that the spiritual nature of the principles is before thought. So if you're forming thoughts deliberately, you're not experiencing before thought. You're not experiencing pure consciousness. You're not experiencing potential. You're not opening the door to new thought, imagining things, seeing something that you haven't seen yet. And that's something that's well within all of our control, but I don't know that we often point enough to it, that being quiet honestly means nothing on your mind. And then people will say, well, how can you have nothing on your mind? You know, you're alive, you're awake. Well, there's a difference between, it's sort of like the difference between, I used to think about this. We had a sailboat at one point, a little sailboat, and I used to lie on the front deck of the sailboat and just look up at the clouds in the sky or look out at the water. And I wasn't thinking about anything, but of course I was seeing the water and the sky. And I mean, there were things I was aware, but I wasn't forming thoughts and thinking about my own thoughts. I was just kind of like drifting. And that's quiet. And I really think that I've been talking to some of my colleagues about that we need to really go back to the sense that original ideas and solutions to your problems and inspiration and soothing thoughts that really bring you peace are not things that you say, well, I got quiet and I sat in my rocking chair and I just rocked and I just I kind of like turned my attention to I'm going to get a solution now. I'm just going to quiet down and I'm going to clear my head. That's not really quiet just because you're not making any noise. A quiet mind has nothing to do with noise. It has to do with uh, just allowing the river of consciousness to flow gently through your mind without, you know, you're making any effort to direct it. And yes, if you're awake and you're where you are. And if a fire alarm rings, you're going to come to wake up and get going. I mean, you're not going to, you're not putting yourself in danger, but you're putting yourself in a peaceful situation. And that's really where imagination thrives. That's where imagination thrives. Good ideas thrive in a quiet mind, thinking slowly and allowing thoughts to just come and go about a problem or something you're trying to resolve. But that's the highest use of your intellect. And your intellect and before thought are not the same thing. Intellect is in the world of form, and imagination arises from the formless. Consciousness is in the world of formless. And once we are focused on the world of form, we're really we're not precluding coming up with answers and seeing things, clearer and coming up with a better way to say something and stuff like that. But we're not deep into the creative process. We're not deep into creativity. And somebody mentioned the fact that, they think of imagination as creativity. It is creativity. And we are creating human life. All of us together as humanity are creating the fate of humanity. And all of us individually are creating our own human experience in the world. And when you really take responsibility for that and say, my imagination would open the door to my ability to create something I haven't even considered, something totally fresh and new, which is what people like Uffe was talking about. Bring something different into the world. And I really feel that that's, I don't want to overinterpret anything because, it's not that is the spiritual part of our work. It's not religious, it's spiritual. Spiritual is the formless energy part of our work. It's the spirit of life. It's the essence of life. It's the force of life. And then it takes form, and the form is the thoughts we've come up with and stored in our memory, which becomes our intellect. What we gather around us, the thoughts that we write down and take to heart, all of that. That's the form of our particular life. But I've often thought, for example, I was thinking, as just today, I was thinking when I was listening to the news this morning while I was getting dressed, and I was struck by the fact that the news was all about what's wrong. I guess I mean, I used to be in the news business and it never occurred to me, but that is what people consider news, is things that didn't work out the way they should have or didn't work out ideally. And so we get obsessed with, oh my gosh, this is insoluble, it's overwhelming. And, I remember that one of the first people I met years ago in the principals, and honestly, at this moment, I cannot even recall his name, but he was a wonderful young school counselor in a very terrible area of Los Angeles where the schools were really bad. And there was a school with these two warring gangs. And like he couldn't believe that the school district was so stupid as to actually locate, a school district and pick where the students would come from, that you ended up with two gangs that were always at war trying to go to school together. But he was the counselor. And the one thing that was true about the school is it was depressing. It was dirty and the walls hadn't been painted inside for years, and the blackboards were, old and faded, and you couldn't hardly see the chalk when the teacher wrote on the blackboard. It was just a really unpleasant place to sit all day. And so he said, that's something that it doesn't matter which gang you're in, you probably equally despise the interior of the school. And it just made sense that they would think this is horrible, it's worse than anything. So he got the gang leaders together in his office. And he said, I'm going to ask you all to help us to make this school a place where kids want to come and learn. And I'm going to ask you whether you wouldn't like to really learn too, whether you wouldn't like to, if you're going to be a leader, I don't care what you're going to lead. If you're going to lead anything, the more you understand life and the more you know, the better it's going to be for you. And he got the two people who were the gang leaders to say that they would try. They would talk to the gangs and see whether they could, maybe one would take the first floor and one would take the second floor, and they would kind of have a little contest about making the walls and the blackboards and the areas that the students spend time attractive. And they did it. And they became friends. And he became like a hero in the school system, like he did this miracle, and all he did really was inspire people's imagination about what could be. And when people get excited about something they can create out of what's possible that they didn't think was possible, it's uplifting. It makes it very difficult to be negative and angry and hateful because you're doing something beautiful. So that's kind of like, I wish there was more of that. I wish that if the principals had an outcome other than just people personally feeling more peaceful, understanding how the mind worked and being more loving and caring of each other and themselves, I wish that people would change their vision for, can we possibly just let go of everything that's happening now that we don't like, and instead of trying to fix it, just imagine what we could create instead. So Naz, I see you have your hand up.
Yes. Hi, Judy. It's always a
Hi.
joy talking to you and
Oh,
seeing you.
nice to see you too. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a joy in many ways, but you always make me think about what we're talking about is so powerful, so simple, but yet we forget it. But one of the things I'm finding with the three principles, as we talk about the imagination, the wisdom, the innate well-being, those kind of things, is that we forget to surrender to those beautiful feelings,
Mhm.
and um, when we forget that they're already inside of us, uh, it's hard to surrender to that. But you bring up this wisdom that's innate in every one of us, but forgetting it's as if it's not even inside.
Yeah.
And your
Mhm.
examples,
Mhm.
your amount of times, 40 years that you spend in it, you see the depth
Yeah.
and the value of surrendering to each of these qualities that are innate. So I thank you for it. Every time I've heard you,
Mhm.
your wisdom just comes up, and it is a challenge for us to surrender to it.
Mhm. Well, it's a challenge. If you think it's a challenge, it is a challenge. Everything you think is a reality. So your reality. So, I used to, yeah, I used to be concerned about things like that. If I had thoughts about myself, like, I don't think I can do that. Yeah, as I learned the principles, I realized that is every time I had that thought, I absolutely could not do that. For a long time, I never learned to water ski because I really didn't think I'd be able to get up on the skis. And I was kind of afraid that I was going to, like drown or break a leg or do something stupid. And this is long before I even heard of the principles, but I remember thinking, what if I really imagine myself skiing? I see people water skiing all the time, they all start in the same place. We used to sit on the edge of a low dock and hold on, and then they'd pull us up and we'd stand up off the dock and there we'd go. And I saw so many people do it, and then I wouldn't even try because I was so sure I couldn't do it. So one day I said, I'm going to do it. I can stand up just as much as they can. All I have to do is stand up and not let go. And I did it. But I never could do it as long as I thought I couldn't. And that's part of the problem too, is I think that's been true for sometimes in the principles. People think, well, how am I going to, this is I mean, I love it and it means a lot to me, but are people going to laugh? Are they going to think it's silly? Are they going to, you know, make fun of Sydney Banks and all this stuff? And you can't worry about stuff like that. There's a whole lot of us that got over it and just saw the truth it spoke to our hearts. If something is true and it reaches your heart, it doesn't make any difference where it came from. It can just be a bird singing, whatever it is that's going to touch you. So I wouldn't worry about it. Well, I think I might take one more question or comment if there is one, but we're kind of close to the end of this allotted time here. So I don't want to start a new topic, but does anyone have something they'd like to say as we wind down or ask? Well, I would like to say thank you all very much for your kind attention and for sharing this time with me, and you're good listeners. Everybody's been lovely, and I really appreciate your being here. And I really appreciate this opportunity. And I hope that that your imagination takes you to places unknown and you enjoy it. So
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Judy, for being here and sharing a little about the power of imagination, and to everyone for coming. And a quick invitation for you on March 11th at the same time as today, 2 p.m. Eastern, Christine Heath will be speaking about taking yourself on as a client. So be sure to come back for our next presentation. Thanks so much, Judy, again. Thanks, everyone.
It's been a pleasure. So take care, everybody, and thanks again. Okay, bye.
Thanks, Judy.
Bye-bye. Oh, you're welcome, Emma. Nice to hear your voice.